Boogers, boogers. Clap, clap. Welcome to my No-Frills review of the RTX 4070 graphics card. Is RTX 4070 good? Is RTX 4070 bad? We find out by testing two $600 cards, NVIDIA Founders Edition and Gigabyte Windforce OC. You watch.
Excellent!
Today's video is brought to you by Micro Center. This is one of my favorite places to buy PC parts. So if you're building or upgrading your PC, I highly recommend making your way down to one of their 25 retail stores in the US. They have consistently competitive prices and an excellent selection of PC hardware and other tech goodies. And they have a custom PC builder on the Micro Center website. Use it to spec out your rig and it will show you parts in store at your nearest location while ensuring compatibility. Then you can pick up in store or have their pros assemble it for you. So click the sponsor link in the description to find a Micro Center near you. Use timestamps below, we'll talk stats, then performance, then summary. Probably you just jump to summary. My big question, is new $600 4070 from 2023 better than old $700 3080 from 2020? Also, is Gigabyte Windforce OC, also $600 MSRP card, better than NVIDIA Founders Edition? NVIDIA card look sleek and sexy. Smaller 2-slot card, still uses 12 VH power connector though. Gigabyte card look basic but functional. No RGB, just 3-fan cooler and backplate. Uses single 8-pin PCI Express graphics power connector. Here are core specs for the video cards. The 4070 has 5,888 CUDA cores, 24% less than a 4070 Ti, but still the same memory setup with 12 gigs. The 4070 also has 40% less CUDA cores than the 4080 as well. The 4070 does have a 200 watt TDP though, and very good efficiency. You only need a 550 watt power supply for your whole PC with this graphics card. Here is my test setup using a 7950X CPU for comparison with other GPUs in my records. The system used Windows 11 version 21H2. Here are the stats for the rest of the test bed if you'd like to take a closer look. And now performance, beginning with clock speeds. Gigabyte Windforce OC is called OC because it has 15 megahertz higher boost clock. Not much, but still made a difference. Peak frequency was 2,865 megahertz, 60 higher than the Founders Edition. Here are the GPU temperatures, core and memory, peak values across all tests. 4070 is a lower power graphics card, so stays relatively cool. Founders Edition 2-slot cooler is good, but Gigabyte Windforce OC cooler is better, 6 to 13 degrees cooler. Good job, Gigabyte. Here is the GPU and system power draw. Versus the RTX 3080, the RTX 4070 uses 120 to 150 watts less power. Not much difference between the Gigabyte Windforce OC and the Founders Edition though. 4070 efficiency is good. Good job, NVIDIA. And now for rasterization benchmarks at 4K, 1440, and 1080. 3D Mark Time Spy Extreme is first, which is a 4K test, and graphics scores of about 8,500 give the RTX 4070s their first taste of competition, as the last gen RTX 3080 was ahead of them by 200 to 300 points. Please note that these 3D Mark tests are synthetic benchmarks, so they're not included in my overall numbers. 3D Mark Port Royal is next, so we can get the vaguest idea of how these cards handle ray tracing. The 4070s couldn't top any of the previous gen RTX 30 series cards in this test, although they did escape complete embarrassment by at least doing better than the Radeon 6000 series GPUs, which are known for their lack of ray tracing performance. Moving on to real-world games though, we have a lot of DirectX 12 titles, starting with Far Cry 6, where at 4K, both of the RTX 4070s land at the bottom of the stack, only hitting 73 to 74 FPS on average, which is about 4 to 5% behind the 3080. My suspicion is that NVIDIA configured the 4070 to do well up to 1440p resolution, but falls short at 4K, pushing buyers towards more expensive options, but we'll see how that plays out. At 1440, we begin to hit CPU limitations, but the 4070s managed to make a modest comeback, straddling the 3080 Ti. Here they're 6 to 7% ahead of the 3080. At 1080p, we are pretty much entirely CPU bound, allowing the two new GPUs to creep up into the middle of the pack in the 150 FPS range. Next we have Shadow of the Tomb Raider, and at 4K, our two 4070s can't keep up with the 3080 10 gig yet again. They are about 4 to 5% slower, just barely topping 100 FPS. At 1440, both cards leapfrog the RTX 3080, beating it by a modest 2.5 to 4%. They're still short of the 3080 Ti though, as well as all four of the Radeon cards. At 1080p, we are CPU bound again, and in this test, all four Radeon cards managed to take the top spots, with NVIDIA populating positions 5 to 13. Cyberpunk 2077 is running with the Ultra Graphics preset, which isn't quite as intense as the recently released Ray Tracing Overdrive mode, but still tasked the 4070s enough to push them back to the bottom of the charts here at 4K. At 1440, the RTX 4070s more than doubled their frame rates, but so did all the other GPUs in the lineup, so they are pulling anchor yet again. And at 1080p, a combination of CPU limitations and reduced system resource usage allowed the 4070s to climb out of last place, once again pushing 1.5 to 3.5% ahead of the RTX 3080. Here's Horizon Zero Dawn using the Favor Quality preset, and at the risk of repeating myself, here we have another title with poor 4K performance for the RTX 4070s, down 7 to 9% versus the RTX 3080. The 1440 results do show improvement though, and both cards edge out the 3080, both in average performance and 1% lows. At 1080, where at the risk of repeating myself again, CPU limitations muddle things, the 4070s improve their rankings and surpass the 6900 XT and RTX 3090 as well. Continuing on to Dirt 5, where you race off-road vehicles in the mud, and at 4K the 4070s failed to impress yet again, slower by 7 to 8%. This is starting to seem pretty intentional, NVIDIA. At 1440 though, the RTX 4070s are still in last place, but they've at least made up some ground with the Gigabyte Windforce taking advantage of that modest manufacturer overclock to get within one frame of the 3080. And at 1080 they do manage to overtake and pull out of last place, even if it's just a 2% lead for the Founders Edition and a 4% lead for the Gigabyte Windforce OC. Next up is Resident Evil Village, another DirectX 12 game, often described as creepy AF. Can we still say AF? Anyway, the 4070s lose to the 3080 here once again, although the Windforce OC is nipping at its heels. At 1440 they managed to surpass the 3080 though, with roughly equivalent results for the Founders Edition and a 4% lead for the Windforce. And here at 1080, the fledgling NVIDIA GPUs extend their lead, pushing roughly 4 and 8% ahead of the 3080, with the Gigabyte card threatening the 3080 Ti as well. Doom Eternal is my only Vulkan title, and it allows you to make demons go splat at extremely high frame rates. Starting at 4K, you might note less than optimal 1% lows for the RX 6000 series and 7000 series cards, which allows the 4070s to compete with them in terms of frame times, although averages are still at the bottom of the pack. 1440 results are a bit more balanced, and while the 4070s did push above 300 FPS here, it's also a good spot to note that they still only have DisplayPort 1.4a outputs, which tops out at 240 Hz at 1440p, while the DP 2.1 connectors on the Radeon 7900s can push 1440p at 480 Hz. Something to keep in mind for anyone looking for a GPU to pair up with a new high-end monitor. And then at 1080 we see solid improvement for the two RTX 4070s, getting well above 400 FPS with respectably competitive 1% lows as well. Lastly, we have a couple DirectX 11 titles. Here is God of War, where at 4K the 4070s experience their worst loss to the RTX 3080 in this roundup, down 12 to 13% versus the last gen card from 2020, and barely scraping past the 60 FPS mark. And at 1440 it somehow gets worse. The Founders Edition is almost 15% slower than the 3080 here, and the Windforce is about 12% behind. There is no relief for the 4070s even at 1080p, although they did close the gap somewhat. They are still down by about 13 and 9% respectively. Lastly, we have Microsoft Flight Simulator, which I included because I love you guys, and it's running in DirectX 11 mode. Flight Simulator is notoriously CPU bottlenecked, although it is least noticeable at 4K. The 4070s performed well here, beating the RTX 3080 and both Radeon 6000 series GPUs, although it was only by 3 or 4 FPS. I should also note that Flight Simulator is also a featured title for NVIDIA's DLSS frame generation, which, as shown in my RTX 4080 review, can get you significantly higher frame rates in this title when paired with a 40 series GPU. So flight sim enthusiasts will likely lean towards NVIDIA's cards, but just to finish out our results, at 1440 we hit that CPU limitation and none of the cards can get more than 80 FPS, resulting in a relatively good showing for the 4070s in the 70 frames per second range. And then at 1080p, wildcard mode is enabled and all of our rankings flip upside down. The 4070s and RX 6900 cards are at the top, the 4080 and 4090 are in last place, which just goes to show, severely CPU limited testing is not always ideal for comparing different GPUs against one another. Okay, time for overall results. Benchmark scores are evenly weighted by game and using the RTX 3080 as the 100% baseline. Is the RTX 4070 faster? No. At least not at 4K. At 1440 it is neck and neck between the two, and at 1080, the 4070 is 2 to 5% faster than the 3080. But also look at the prices. The closest RTX 4070 competitor by price from AMD is the RX 6900 XT or RX 6950 XT. Both are $600 to $650 currently. Those are 10 to 15% faster than the RTX 3080 at 1080 and 1440, and 5 to 10% faster at 4K. So a better value for your money is available from the Radeon team. And so to conclude, why NVIDIA? Why must you insist on doling out the bare minimum of gen-on-gen performance uplift after 2.5 years of waiting? PC gamers have come to expect that with time comes better performance and better performing hardware that is also cheaper. NVIDIA CEO Jensen Huang wants us to believe that Moore's Law is dead because he wants hardware that performs 50% better to cost 50% more money, which means the benefits of technological advancements in GPU manufacturing and design translate directly into dollars that go into NVIDIA's bank account rather than disseminating to PC gamers via less expensive hardware upgrades. And perhaps the business-minded out there would agree with Jensen's stance, but allow me to reference historical precedent. We'll go back about 10 years and look at gen-on-gen performance uplifts comparing the previous 80-tier card to the next Gen 70-tier card. Going back to 2013, the GTX 970 launched in 2014 for $330, and it was about 21% faster than the previous gen GTX 780, which launched in May 2013 for $650. The GTX 1070 was $380, and it was 29% faster than the GTX 980, which launched September 2014 for $550. The RTX 2070 jumped the 70-tier pricing up to $500, but it was still 16% faster than the GTX 1080 from the previous gen, which launched May 2016 for $600. And even the RTX 3070, which launched at $500, was 26% faster than the RTX 2080, which launched in September 2018 for $700. And now the 4070 can't even keep up with the 3080 at 4K, despite another $100 price increase. Now, I am sure that there will be a not insignificant number of people who decide that a card that performs roughly on par with the 3080 for $600 is worth buying, especially if those people game on 1440 resolution monitors. But it needs to be reiterated that NVIDIA can make cards that are much faster than this, and they could have set the 4070 up to perform better. But they didn't, because if Jensen is going to give you more performance, he wants to make sure to charge you for every single frame. But there it is. Hopefully you guys now have a much better idea of how the RTX 4070 stacks up, and we are told that there should be plenty of these available, and we shouldn't expect shortages or scalper pricing, which is another positive note alongside the 4070's efficiency results. The Gigabyte Windforce OC likewise performed quite well and seems to be a decent upgrade in cooling and performance, if not aesthetics, versus the Founders Edition, especially at the same price. But that's all for this review. Closing reminder to check out my store at paulshardware.net for merchandise, shirts, pint glasses, and other thumbscrew related items. And of course, hit the like button if you enjoyed this No-Frills video. Subscribe to my channel if you really enjoyed it. Thanks as always for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.